The previous basket is under review.
Hello, friends, and welcome to the Basket Under Review podcast. I'm your host, Eamon Brennan, buzzer at eamonbrennan.com. That's my newsletter. Go check it out. Also, Basket Under Review, brand new college basketball website that is fully up and running and crushing it at the start of the season here. Lots of great stuff coming out every day. We have a great guest back for the second week in a row this week. It's Tate Frazier of The Ringer, One Shining Podcast, and all sorts of other good stuff over at The Ringer. We're excited to talk to Tate about what was really a fantastic first week of college hoops, a very offensively oriented first week of college hoops. Product on the floor has really never been better. So it's exciting to not only talk about real basketball, we'll talk about really good basketball, which we'll be doing in just a moment. First, I want to encourage everybody, as we always do, go check out basketunderreview.com. $10 a month to sign up. You get access to everything that's written on a daily basis, 4 to 5, really, really good college basketball analysis pieces on just every day, every weekday anyway. You also get access to the Discord, where Trilly Donovan breaks news, where there's thousands of people in there chatting about college basketball pretty much 24/7, all different fan bases and, Discord channels with all kinds of their own lore that you kind of have to figure out if you're going to dip your toes in there. But I'm getting my arms around it a little bit. We also, if you sign up, you also support this show and all the free stuff we put out multiple times a week. So go to basketunderreview.com, sign up, be a part of the community. It's the best place to be for college basketball right now. Also, check out our sponsor, Homefield, homefieldapparel.com. I'm wearing a Homefield sweater right now, sweatshirt. Oh, yeah. They've been dropping some real heat lately. There's Coastal Carolina warm-up jacket that just came out. Is like, I don't think I can get away with it at 40 years old, but I'm strongly tempted to give it a shot and roll back the clock a little bit. You know the deal. It's Homefield. It's awesome college sports apparel, college basketball, college football apparel. Go to homefieldapparel.com. Check them out. Tell them we sent you. And thanks very much to Homefield for being the presenting sponsor of this show. All right, Tate, that's the preamble. We're in it. How are you? How was your first week of the 2025-26 college hoop season?
I'm kind of grinning ear to ear right now. I mean, it's just been a great week of college basketball. So many storylines. I was fortunate to be at the Blue Blood Showdown, a class off, as I like to call this. We talked about this Kansas versus Carolina, just complimenting each other throughout this entire game. We got to see Nate Oates versus Rick Pitino. We got to see Calipari versus Tom Izzo. And, after the game, Calipari talking about Izzo. He's 70, like being shocked that he's 70 years old. We got to see a Tom Crean showdown between two programs that he's obviously tied to very closely. They talked about the Brady Bowl, but again, it was really about Tom Crean. So there's been so many storylines. We got the second generation stars, Kyan Anthony looking great for Syracuse. We got Jake Wilkins throwing down windmills like his dad, Dominique Wilkins at Georgia. So just a lot of storylines, a lot of fun stuff to get to. And like you said, it's all about the offense. So if you've ever had any gripes about college basketball, saying it's ugly to watch, it's grating to watch, all this sort of stuff, this is a good time to lock into college basketball because, boy, it's been a lot of fun.
Yeah, that's where I want to start today. We just had one of the most offensive first weeks of a college basketball season ever, one of the most entertaining. If you're still the kind of person who thinks that college basketball is played at a slower pace or isn't as efficient or is still the circa 2010 scrums around the rim where teams are scoring 67 to 65 and just physically battling each other constantly, kind of making up for a lack of technical skill with defense and rebounding. It's time to update your priors. We've been saying it, Tate, on your show, on One Shining Podcast, for the last year or two now, of how good the actual college basketball product has become. Just the act of watching a game. You get all of the pageantry and the crazy crowds and all that fun stuff that was always there, and I think was the appeal for a lot of people, in addition to the tournament and all that. But now you just get high level, high quality basketball played really deep down the sort of the Ken Palm rankings. You go down the list and you look at teams in the 40s and 50s. You're like, this is a good team. We saw that all last week. Will Warren, for the aforementioned Basket Under Review in his watch list, noted that this is in this first week, there were 105.9 points scored per 100 possessions. That's a record in the first 7 days of any college basketball season. Record high in 2-point field goal percentage, free throw percentage, turnover percentage, offensive rebounding percentage since 2013-2014 is at its highest. The possessions per game are the highest since 2018-19 so far. On Saturday, this past Saturday, November 8th, Will writes the 78.9 points per game in those games, all the games on Saturday, was the highest scoring individual day of college basketball recorded in at least 30 years. Ken Pomeroy wrote about this today too. Really, so he wrote about it Monday. So when you're hearing this, it will have been yesterday. But he wrote about sort of the culture of sort of classic college basketball fans and the defense and rebounding and toughness and move your feet and slide and all that stuff's great. And I like watching great defense too. But the fact is, if you want to sit down and watch a tactical range of styles, a breadth of styles, you want to watch Alabama pull St. John's into a 100 possession, whatever it ended up being, 90 possession game. Despite Rick Pitino's best efforts and to his great frustration after the game. You are getting a lot of bang for your buck with college basketball these days. Just the act of sitting down on a Saturday, flipping your TV on. You don't have to have an emotional investment in the team to just get some really high level, high quality stuff.
Yeah, it's been high quality, high level basketball, like you said, and that I feel like the St. John's Alabama game was the perfect example of that. I mean, every single moment in that game, if you looked up, if you got out of your chair, it's like I just missed multiple game-changing plays in this game. And I do feel like in the sport right now, we do have like this controversial who's number one going on. Like if you go to different sites, depending on kind of who's your fancy, right? You go to KenPom, Kentucky's the number one team. If you go to Torvik, Houston's the number one team. The AP just updated their poll. They put Houston as the number one team. We also have Purdue, who was the preseason number one team that did not look great without Trey Kaufman-Renn, but that's because he's an All-American player. So there's 4 teams right now that you could argue, depending on kind of what's your fancy, is the best team in the country, and you would have a reason to make that argument too. So I think that's the best part about the game right now. It's like, and based on what we've seen, maybe you could argue Arizona is the best team in the country, or Alabama's the best team in the country, or whatever you want to do. Like I said, Duke could be that team. So again, it's really good for college basketball. Maybe Michigan, Illinois. I don't know. There's a lot of teams that are in the mix that could be in that conversation as the best team in the country based on what we've seen just a week in. And the offense has been great. The schematical approach of these coaches has been incredible. I mean, just see what Nate Oates did to Rick Pitino's switching defense, right? He had his guards so ready for when the bigs got switched on them to pull the ball back out, to reset and attack the basket and get downhill. And it worked so many times where we saw, Ruben Prey get switched on Holloway, and Holloway's like, oh, this is food. Easy layup, right? I'm going to drive by this guy, and it's going to be a problem for them. And I do feel like that game for me was kind of the game of the weekend, and it just showed kind of where we are in college basketball, where it's like great coaching, great execution, and high-level basketball players, and it was just a beautiful thing to watch. And you add in the fact, Eamon, that it's in MSG, which just makes it feel even more meaningful. So it's just a great weekend.
Yeah, no, it was. I mean, the St. John's, Alabama, there are teams that that I watched this past week and this past weekend where I came away being like, a little concerning. Kansas we can talk about. But the Alabama St. John's game was that kind of game where you come away kind of impressed with the winners and the losers. Obviously, Alabama going in, playing the way they did, Philon running the game the way he did, super impressive, right? Obviously, I think that St. John's defense looks like it's going to be good, and I felt like kind of played well. They
I know, right? Yeah.
They missed some assignments, but I felt like every time, every bucket was hard for Alabama, and they finished them anyway. But it wasn't like, St. John's getting run through here and they have no answer or whatever. It was still a pretty well defended performance, I thought. And then you turn that around on the other end, and whatever the concerns about St. John's on the offensive end coming in were a little bit alleviated, I think, because they showed that you can handle the ball with their setup and get it up the floor and find shot makers, get to the rim, and create a lot of offense without having the sort of, much ballyhooed, much discussed conventional point guard type. And I thought that was a good sign to see, even if, Rick Pitino in the post-game press conference was, annoyed at how quickly some of those shots went up. And he really wanted St. John's to try to slow the game down and make Alabama work harder on defense. I think it's always hard against Alabama because they just speed you up on both ends of the floor and you just get into the flow with them. But the fact that St. John's hung the way they did and scored the way they did from a variety of sources, I thought was really promising. So yeah, one of those games where you come away kind of impressed with both teams. I think speaking of, you mentioned them early in the show, but probably one of the most impressive teams in the sport is Indiana. Just to, I think they started, let's take a look real quick here. I think they started the season in KenPom ranked, in the low 30s, high 40s. Since then they beat Alabama A&M 98-51, which, it's Alabama A&M, but that's the kind of game that under Mike Woodson, Indiana was often winning by like 8, 10, 12 points. And, you think, like, fans say, like, a win is a win, but it kind of isn't when you have to worry about the net ranking. And you look at Indiana last year, and had their net eventually gotten to be a little bit stronger than it was, their record might have got them in the tournament. And they just didn't have enough metrics wise to get there. So that kind of stuff is important. And then you go and play Marquette and put up 100 on them in 76 possessions. Tucker DeVries was awesome. Lamar Wilkerson, awesome. Indiana is a total 180-degree switch from what they were last year in terms of their offensive spacing, the areas of the floor they're trying to play in, the kinds of shots they take. Their shot diet is 3 and rim maxed out, almost to an Alabama-like level. And so, yeah, coming into the season, like, you kind of sort of look at their roster, and I think this will come back at various points. I don't think Marquette really had the kind of players to punish this. They are probably going to be a little light up front. If Reed Bailey and Sam Alexis are essentially your two big guys, with Tucker DeVries kind of floating back and forth as a sort of stretch four. You're probably going to have some nights in the Big Ten where rebounding and at the play at the front of the rim is going to be a problem. But on the offensive end, if they play like this or anything close to it for most of the season, that team is going to be a problem. They space everybody out and shoot the ball really well, and it's a small sample size, and the heat will come off the ball a little bit probably as we go forward. But Indiana, super duper impressive early in the season, and has probably risen as much as any team in the country in terms of KenPom ranking and other sort of underlying metrics.
And even looking at the AP voters, right, which they're always a little bit behind the 8 ball, as we know, and that's just kind of how it is what it is. But they're getting more and more.
Although they were on Purdue, they're all over Purdue. I was a little surprised by that. Like, that's not the kind of thing the AP poll people typically do. Is like, if you're number one and you win, even if it's a close game, you stay number one. It's kind of funny.
Yeah, I guess they were watching. But again, they weren't keeping up with the fact that Trey Kaufman-Renn did not play in that game, I guess. That was a weird thing to kind of dock, especially when you think about Houston. To me, has not looked great either, right? Houston has not looked like the number one team in the country, or as we expected. They feel like they're kind of having some growing pains figuring out who they are. So to swap Purdue for Houston seems a little bit odd and a little bit off. So I think you are right about that. But just looking at Torvik with Indiana, 13th in the country in efficiency field goal percentage, which is really impressive for this group, and it kind of passes the eye test as you watch this group. They have nobody returning. This is a totally different Indiana team, a totally different group, and it did feel like, I don't know about you, but it just felt refreshing to watch, like an Indiana team with Indiana on their jersey shoot the ball with consistency and play basketball with sort of a free-flowing nature. Which, again, this is no shade to Mike Woodson. This is no shade to the iterations that we've had with whether it's Archie or whoever it is. You know what I mean? I'm not trying to throw shots at those guys. I'm just saying it did feel nice. And last year, obviously, we remember the Bahamas, where Indiana kind of just flops down there, and then there's the rumblings and the rumors of is Darian DeVries talking to Indiana, and there's just a very strange story. So to get here, cut to the next year in November, and see like this version of Indiana, I just feel like it's very encouraging. And 26 overall in Torvik right now, 2-0. Blow out Marquette, which is I know Marquette's not the Marquette that we've seen the past couple of seasons, but again, it does feel good to have that type of win, that kind of dominating victory. And when we're talking about, the quads and all this sort of stuff, you know what I mean? When you get blowout wins, that helps your resume, and I think that's really huge for Indiana. So it's a very encouraging sign, and I've seen some teams that I really like in the Big Ten just at face value, and I feel like Indiana is one of those teams that really comes to mind when I first think of that entire group. UCLA is another team as well that I'm just like, I like what I see so far of who they have on that team and what they can be as they kind of mature into the season.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, again, looking at their roster in the summer, it was a little bit, you like the thought of it, and maybe some enthusiasm for Tucker DeVries' arrival was dampened by the fact that he's going to follow his dad, right? Like if he had just been a player on the open market, sort of like Sturtz at Iowa, you know, it's so understood that player is going to follow that coach, that there isn't this big, 2 weeks where they're making a decision and visiting schools and putting, graphics on Instagram and doing the whole thing. It maybe doesn't hit right away. It's just like, yeah, my son's coming to play for me. Obviously, that's part
They're
of the deal
hurting
here.
Tipton's business. You know what I mean? Like he needs the graphics.
Yeah. Yeah. And so that may be, through maybe me or other folks a little bit off the scent, but I also think, the backcourt looked solid and fine, but it's the kind of thing you need to see. You assume they're going to space the floor and play sort of a modern style of offense. And I thought from the jump, it was going to be like a breath of fresh air for Indiana fans, but it's about executing on it, obviously. And until you see it in action, it's hard to get as excited about it. But just in terms of enjoyability and watchability, Indiana is going to be right up there at the top of the list this year.
And Wilkerson's a star, by the way. You know what I mean? Like I know DeVries will be the one that we talk about, but I think Wilkerson, you know what I mean? And his story from Sam Houston State and sort of his journey up the ranks of college basketball, it feels like a name that a lot of people that are casuals won't know right now. But when we get into conference play, we get into March Madness, hopefully Indiana will be, I expect them to be in the mix, obviously, for the tournament. They should be in the tournament this year. So I just feel like he's a name and a game that will get well known as we get into the season, which will be fun.
For sure. Okay, well, let's go back to the Carolina-Kansas game real quick because you were there.
Mm-hmm.
It's a few days ago now, but speaking of sort of preseason concerns, we'll talk about Carolina because I was a little hard on Carolina in the offseason. I think another roster that I did not particularly understand, or at least relative to what it was reportedly said to have cost North Carolina's boosters and
I think that
NIL.
was the big holdup, right? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like you get that $14 million number, and everyone's saying, "Well, where did the $14 million?"
Yeah, can we see some of the books on it? Can we see the accounting?
Right.
Here? Let's show us the QuickBooks. But a great start for Carolina, but Kansas, I think, simultaneously very excited to watch Darren Peterson this entire season. A little concerned that no one else on that team is going to be able to score, and that the load on him is going to be something that I, as a non-invested, neutral, I'm kind of cool with it because I want to watch that guy shoot the ball like 20 times a game, if at all possible, maybe 25, maybe 30 if he wants to. But that might have to be like there were no surprise Kansas performances where you're like, oh, actually, this guy might be the number two here that we didn't know existed in the offseason. I mean, the way Flory Badunga plays, he's not a guy you can really dump the ball to, so he has to just do activity stuff at the front of the rim, get offensive rebounds and rim runs and that kind of thing. I don't think that's changed much in the offseason, at least as far as we saw at Carolina. So tell me what you saw from Kansas when you were in Chapel Hill watching that game, because a little bit of the sort of, maybe it's a little confirmation bias, but the preseason concerns were a little validated, I think.
Yeah, I think I saw the number one pick in Darren Peterson, and maybe I'm jumping the gun there, but I just feel like a guard of his stature and the fact that he's able to have, quote unquote, a bad game, but still get that kind of production is a really, it's hard to be a guard and be able to do something like that. And just physically, you can kind of see how he can impose himself on a game, and, the ability to be able to work the officials, get, foul calls. I mean, some of the stuff you're just like, oh, that's NBA. I joke with Jacob Myers, who runs the account, League Him. I'm like, yeah, just go ahead. This guy's already leagued. You know what I mean? Like, he already is an NBA player with the way he kind of carries himself. And to go into that type of environment, Carolina fans, they get the wine and cheese Sam Cassell conversation has been brought up quite a bit. But for a game like that, they show up for. So it was a very, loud environment. They came with the whiteout with Caleb Wilson trying to put the onus on the fans to show up in all white. The people did. You had some high-profile people in the building. You had Larry Brown in the building. You had Mark Turgeon, former Maryland coach, in the building. You had Roy Williams in the building, right? So a lot of different cast of characters in the basketball world that were there trying to take in this game. Steve Robinson, former Arizona assistant and North Carolina assistant there as well, and head coach back in the day for FSU. So a lot of big-time people there trying to watch, so a big-time player in Darren Peterson. And like you said, the entire game, you're just like, who is the number two guy on this team? Trey White showed up in spots. Tiller had some moments in this game as well. Council Jr. as well. I mean, they're just the group of guards are very athletic. They're very rangy. They gave Kyan Evans a lot of problems in the first half, where you could tell he was like, my God, these guys are going to be tough to deal with, especially on the defensive end. But offensively, they just struggled to find anybody outside of Darren Peterson. And Badunga just really struggled with Visar. Or Vasar, or Vasar, whatever you want to say. I've heard every different iteration of how to pronounce his name, but I call him Henry, and Henry had a really good game, and his size, at 7'2", really made Flory have a tough time in this game. And I think without Kansas being able to get paint points, get in the paint, get easy buckets, that second half just really opened up for North Carolina. I think they ended up making 13 of their first 18 shots, which also helps in that second half. But yeah, Darren Peterson is a superstar. There's really no doubt about it. I think he's going to be a first-team All-American, and I think he's going to be the guy that, can maybe drive this team, because he did go up against Seth Trimble, who's one of the best perimeter defenders, in my opinion, definitely in the ACC. I would argue potentially in the country. Now, he's got an injury that they're going to have to deal with for the next, 6 weeks or so, which is tough. But in this game in particular, Bill Self called it out afterwards. He was just like, Seth was great on Darren Peterson, but it goes back to, that is impressive for Darren to be kind of locked up the entire game and still produce the way that he did.
Yeah, it's a little bit like the St. John's Alabama game, where you're seeing a team, lose, or a player not be as effective as you maybe think, and you still come away being like, oh, it still looked really good though. Like,
yeah,
still,
right.
like it's not you don't have to worry as much about the result, at least in Peterson's case. Like I said, I think the Kansas conversation is just going to be a tricky one, because I was talking to somebody else about this yesterday, and it's or a couple days ago, and it's like, with Kansas, you always at least have one or two program guys, and they may not be your most talented players, but they give you a level of comfort. Your DeJuan Harris's, your KJ Adams, even if you have problems with their game and the roster fit may or may not work as well as you'd like it to, and the floor gets a little scrunched, they're still, reliable base level guys who give you certain things. And that's just, it's a weird feeling to look at a Kansas roster without even those guys on it. And it just be, well, we've got this incredible potential number one pick freshman who's as talented as any guy who's come through under Bill Self, going all the way up to your Andrew Wigginses and your Joel Embiids. But there's just, it's going to be really interesting to see him try to get other guys up to speed and involved and at the level that they have a little bit more to offer, particularly on the offensive end. It's also just going to be fascinating to watch Peterson deal with it, because we may get to a point this season where, sort of like teams did against Kansas last year, standing off certain guys, playing them differently than they would play other teams because the perimeter shooting and shot making were just not there. Peterson may have a bunch of games this year where it's like, oh, they're there's 5 minutes left and they're running a double team at him at 25 feet away, and just making him get rid of the ball and try to go run back and get it, and just trying to take him out of the game. And I think he's good enough to overcome it, but it's going to be fun watching teams try to figure them out, and the sort of back and forth interplay with him all year, because he's still a pretty young guy. And the fact that I think he's probably capable of overcoming it to a level where Kansas can still be competitive, if not as good as we usually expect them to be, is probably a compliment in and of itself. So we'll see how things play out with him. Another exciting player who emerged in the first week that we have to talk about, because I think this is the most viral I've seen a highlight clip go in recent college basketball memory. I'm talking about, of course, Virginia Tech freshman, I believe it's Neoklis Avdalis. I think I got that right, but apologies to all of our Greek listeners if that was butchered.
He goes by Neo, and
Neo will work.
I think Neo works. And also, look, this is he has the same agent as Giannis Antetokounmpo, so he is kind of like Giannis's future Greek Luka, is how I would describe him. I feel like Giannis is definitely like playing a game where he's like, I need this guy on the Greek national team, and Neo looks the part so far.
I mean, talk about Luka. I don't think I've ever seen such a consensus among random, NBA burner basketball account types, quote tweeting a highlights package and just being like, that it's Luka. What the heck? But you watch him play, and sort of the separation that I'm talking about his performance against Providence, by the way, for folks who are curious. He had 33 points, absolutely ran what was a great overtime game against Providence, which I was actually kind of a little encouraged by Providence. You know, I know Virginia Tech's down in the 60s, 70s and it's just efficiency, but you get an individual performance like this one. And if people haven't seen it, please go find it. It's pretty stunning because you are watching a guy essentially who's, 6'9", super talented with the ball in his hands, get separation on the kinds of moves you see Luka Doncic perform, 20, 25 times a night in the NBA. Little steps, step backs where he's getting like 5 or 6 feet of space away from a defender, slicing through sort of screen coverages where he's able to collect the ball and then step, 3 or 4 feet outside of his original path and get space for like a little floater or a fadeaway type of shot, in the mid range. It was spectacular. And like I said, I feel like I see this stuff sometimes. I'm like, I want to calm myself down a little bit. Cause again, to be fair, he had like 8 points on 3 of 9 shooting in their first game. So it wasn't like he's been against Charleston Southern. I think that was on Monday. Let me look at his actual line. Yeah. He was 8 on 3 of 13, 1 of 6 from 3. And, I've seen a few people who have watched him play prior to coming to college basketball who thought that the Providence game was probably a little bit of a shooting outlier. So he may not be quite that good as a 3-point shooter. But he was spectacular, and the visual of it, it's one thing to be like, oh yeah, this international guy that people kind of thought was good, but didn't know how good he was because we've got about 8 million international guys, and someone like me has never seen them play beyond YouTube clips or their random games you can find on YouTube that their youth club puts up to get the name out there or whatever.
Right.
But it's a fun part of the season in that regard too, because we're getting to see which of these guys are actually that good. And like I said, the visual of watching him play, the way he played, and the player he resembled, you couldn't help but get excited.
Yeah, I call Mike Young Mr. November. I feel like he's always had like a random win in November that'll really shock the system. I remember back in Maui when they beat Michigan State, right? That was a big time moment kind of for their program and for this regime of Mike Young. And I think everybody was wondering if the game had passed Mike Young by. But I do like his staff. Shout out to my guy, Coach Frazier, Chester Frazier. I think he had a big part in defining Neo to getting him kind of through this process. Toby Lawal is another guy I really like on this Virginia Tech roster that I think is a nice piece for them. Jaden Shutt as well was a nice piece in this game who had some big moments. So just in general, Virginia Tech looks like a team in the ACC that's going to help kind of that middle of the ACC that everybody's been dying to kind of get better, right? It's always been like the haves and the have-nots with no middle class in the ACC. So it feels like Virginia Tech can be in the upper middle class of the ACC potentially with a talent like this. But you mentioned random guys from Europe that we don't know. I mean, Vox, the freshman, for Providence as well. I mean, he has a 3 that goes all the way but in at the end of this game, and he had a really impressive performance as well. So between Vox, which is spelled Vaaks, Stefan Vox, or Stefan Vox, depending on what your fancy is. Again, we've heard different pronunciations of all these guys, so you got to figure out how you want to play it. But those 2 guys going head-to-head in this game were really impressive, and I do like this Providence team. I think they did show some moxie in this game, but, it was a very highlight thing where it was like Neo's highlights go around on Twitter, and everyone's like, who the hell is this guy? He should be wearing number 77, and then from there, you kind of become a star within the sort of college basketball internet culture. And, that's good for Virginia Tech. They needed something to get a little bit of boost to get some visibility. And this, again, was probably one of the better games of the weekend. So for a lot of people that didn't see this, it was on Peacock. So I understand some people may have missed it on Peacock. But if you want to go on YouTube, watch the 5 minutes. You had Fanta on the call, who was great as well. So it was just a really good, fun game that kind of felt like it may not be at the Mohegan Sun, in Uncasville, Connecticut, but it turned out to be a great one.
Yeah, Fanta was crushing that call, man. Some of those Abdallas, like just absolutely crushing the made threes.
He had a good call where he was like, "This is a
progressively
March.
more excited."
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just saying he had a couple like, this is a touch of March. He didn't do the classic like this feels like an Elite Eight game. He did, the right amount of like this is a nice like little a tidbit of March, but not, going full Rothstein with some of this feels like a Sweet 16 game. So it was perfect. It was a good job.
Yeah, that was not off the Rothstein conveyor belt of tweets, but we'll get there. Yeah, so you're right. I think this is, again, we talked at the beginning of the show. I keep coming back to this about the product on the floor, and I think this stretches into the freshman and the draft type stuff. You look around the country now, you throw Abdallas into the mix with some of the other freshman performances we've seen and how Debanza has looked, and obviously Peterson, and you can go on down the line. Koa Pete, we talked about right in the aftermath of that Arizona game last week, pardon me, on the show. And if I think there's going to be sort of a collective, like we saw with the Abdallas clips going around, there's going to be kind of like a collective awakening for some people who don't watch a ton of college basketball anyway, just because there are so many good, interesting young players who are draft picks who people are going to want to see. And like, again, if Abdallas can recreate anything like what he looked like against Providence, he's going to get a lot more of those clips because people are going to be comparing him to Luka literally all season. That will be fun. To be clear, I don't think he's as good as Luka Doncic, but
no,
he does visually resemble him in a very aesthetically pleasing way.
It's nice, and I also want to bring up Caleb Wilson's another guy. Just in that group where I don't think North Carolina fans have been more shocked by a freshman actually being better than the hype. You know what I mean? There's so many times where you get these guys that come into school that are a 5-star, that are a McDonald's All-American, that are supposed to be this, supposed to be that. A lot of people said that he was a Marvin Williams type, right? Marvin Williams was the sixth man on a national title team. Caleb Wilson is the best player on North Carolina. And if you look at box plus minus, if that's something that you fancy, he's above 20. He's one of like 14 players in the country that are there right now. And defensively, he's been incredible. Offensively, he's been incredible. And, it just goes back to what you're saying. I mean, there's so much talent in that freshman group that's just really exciting because you can kind of pick your own flavor, your own fancy, and you're going to have a good time watching them. So it's good.
Yeah. Yeah, it's good. No, Wilson's been great. And honestly, the Trimble injury is interesting for him too, given how much ball handling and creation he is already doing. He's going to have to do more, and he might find it a little bit, even if, you lose in the aggregate a lot of what Trimble brings, but, especially on the defensive end, as we saw the other day, it might be an interesting wrinkle in Wilson's development in his, what looks like it's going to be, 1 year in college basketball. He's going to have a few more touches and a few more decisions to make on the ball this year, which should be fun to watch.
And everyone thought that Cameron Boozer would be the player of the week, freshman of the week 1 in ACC basketball play, but it's Neo and Caleb Wilson. You know what I mean? So already we're off to a surprising, interesting start. So it's good.
Yeah, we sure are. Not so aesthetically pleasing, I have to say. Really an outlier in the first week of college hoops was that Michigan State Arkansas game, which ended with some fan in East Lansing getting slapped with a towel, which, boy, you just never like to see that. I hope everybody is doing okay. I mean, towels can hurt. It can be a little bit. You don't want to get hit with a towel. We've all, if you were at
especially
any point,
when
like
you're not the one talking. You know what I mean? That was the toughest part. The kid that got hit, he wasn't even saying anything. He was just guilty by association.
I didn't know that. Yeah. I just saw the clip going around. I did not see the backstory, but hopefully everybody's healing and no serious injuries were sustained. But yeah, you could understand why Arkansas walked off the court so frustrated. I think they probably think they were a better team than Michigan State, and there were some stretches in that game that were difficult to watch on the offensive end. A few Michigan State possessions where a few shots went up and the ball didn't touch anything, and just headed straight back down to the floor for another opportunity. But I think it kind of made sense given what we see on this roster. I wrote my preview about Michigan State a few weeks back, and just sort of like you look at it and you see a team that's probably going to defend and rebound and play really, really hard, and then kind of needs someone, particularly probably like a Cohen Carr, really. I mean, maybe Cam Ward is that guy, and Carr is just kind of his bouncy self, and that's just kind of what he's going to be. But you look around and you're like, they need one guy to be a really forceful offensive addition, whether that's through development like Carr, whether through bringing in a highly ranked young guy, because the offensive outlook was not particularly strong. And I think we kind of saw the prototypical Michigan State performance against Arkansas, which is just, there are going to be days where they are just not going to shoot the ball well. I mean, they're in games against, they beat Colgate by 11 last Monday, which is not the most convincing performance in the world, particularly at home. They are 331st in 3-point field goal percentage. They've shot 20% on threes in their first two games, 66.7% on free throws, which indicates to me there's just, that number is probably where it is going to be for most of the year. I mean, they're not going to shoot 20% from three, but in terms of the ranking, they're probably going to be in that mix for a while. So kind of a fascinating game and an impressive win in that, you look up and down Arkansas's roster and you just see a lot more talent there, but this is how Michigan State's probably going to have to get the job done this year.
Yeah, Jeremy Fears, I think, he's the one that you really hope he can kind of steady the ship for this team and get everybody in position, have Kohler get you some easy buckets. It was kind of surprising to me that Cohen Carr ended up being the leading scorer in that game. I remember his lane violation late with Pringle on the line more than anything than I do his 15 points because, that's sort of the kind of game it was. I would call it a muck fest, a lot of muck in that game. And Arkansas, when they went on that run late, they went on a 7-0 run late in that game under, the last 4 minutes. It felt like, oh, okay, Arkansas is going to figure out a way to kind of squeeze one out. But then somehow Tom Izzo kind of does what he does, and his team stays tough. They figure out a way to just kind of survive that game. And if they can do that, as they've been prone to do throughout the years, then I think it will be another year where Michigan State goes to the NCAA tournament. They're going to be a tough out for anybody. But I think you hit the nail on the head with this team. It's just like who's scoring amongst this group of guys, you know what I mean? Who is the go-to guy? I think Ward is the best answer, but again, we need to see him do it consistently. But just from the initial eye test, it does feel like he's going to end up being the guy. Yeah.
For Arkansas, I have to say that the alleged, well, not alleged. I mean, he's the guy who slapped the towel at the kid. Trayvon Brazile. I feel bad for him because I remember watching him early in his Arkansas career. And you talk about a guy just dripping with talent at
so
his
much promise
size,
and potential.
The athleticism that he had, some of the games he had, again, early on under Eric Musselman at Arkansas. He's sort of the last remnant of that previous tenure. He's had really bad injury luck, and you look at him now, and he's a solid sort of more conventional player. He's a college big guy now, and he struggled, I think. He had 3 points on 5 shots, didn't really impact the game in terms of rim protection and rebounding. And I think he is, you'd like for him to come around a little bit more just athletically, but I just wonder if it's just not going to happen because he's just different than what he was when he was younger and pre-injury and a bit springier. So that was kind of interesting to see. DJ Wagner, Darius Acuff, interesting backcourt. Acuff had some shooting problems against Michigan State. A lot of that is, I think, down to Michigan State's defense and then tough atmosphere and figuring things out on the fly. Carter Knox, after really being at the center of Arkansas's run late in the year last year, and playing a lot more minutes. He played 18 minutes, had 0 points on 1 field goal attempt.
He's the more concerning one for me. Yeah, I'm weird, I'm just right? I'm like, what's happening here? It does feel like that they almost have too many, like between Wagner, Acuff, and Malik Thomas, who's looked great. It does feel like he's almost like an odd man out. Not that he's a guard in that group, but it just feels strange. He's the one to me. I mean, as much as you were mentioning Brazile, I was like, Carter Knox is supposed to be, by some accounts, vying for like SEC first team, right? So for him to be an offer in this game felt very strange and just like a non-impactful. Like there was a moment where I'm watching this game where I'm like, oh, that's right, Carter Knox is on. He's on the floor right now. It was just very strange.
Yeah, he maybe had a little bit of an injury thing. I think he had a sprained toe and he missed their first game. I'm not sure if Calipari talked about it after the fact, but he talked, the run up to the Michigan State game that they weren't going to play him if he wasn't completely healthy. So maybe the toe thing didn't have anything to do with it. But yeah, it's a little weird because, again, he was a huge part of them coming together down the stretch last year and figuring things out after that horrible 0-5 start to SEC play. And you think he needs to be an impactful, frequent, if not starter, then a bench guy who plays starter minutes. And
but it also kind of coincided with Boogie Flan goes out, and then it was
True.
like he kind you know what I mean? So it's like there was a glut there last year before he kind of broke through. So I don't know. It feels like there may be something there. But again, I'm sure Arkansas Calipari fans are going to blame the toe, and you know what? I'm going to stick with them. I'm going to blame the toe too. So I'll give him a break.
I say this genuinely. Arkansas fans, feel free to reach out, like on Twitter or whatever, because I'm always curious to hear what people think about this because it's early in the season. They're the ones paying attention to every press conference and practice update all summer. So maybe they know something that I don't know there. But just watching the game, I was like you're right. It's like, oh yeah, Carter Knox. Where you been at, buddy? What's going on?
Yeah,
here?
He's supposed to be your best player.
Deal? Yeah. So look, I don't know. We'll see how it goes, but really a fascinating start for several teams in the SEC. I think Florida a little bit concerning with the Arizona game. We talked about that last week. Obviously, they came back out and beat North Florida by 40 or whatever. I'm just going down the KenPom list here, trying to remind myself of teams that I was a little bit nervous about. Not Gonzaga.
Florida's
Gonzaga
got Miami and Florida State this week, right? So I mean that's also interesting to kind of get like a nice barometer against two new programs with two new coaches. You know what I mean? So that'll be interesting to see kind of like how real is the Arizona thing / is this Florida backcourt actually a problem? We'll learn that this week. It feels like.
Yeah, and then by the first week of December, I guess December 9th. So they play at Duke on December 2nd, and then not at UConn. They play at MSG on December 9th against UConn. So that'll be a real sort of telltale week for Florida. We'll give them some time to figure it out. In the meantime, Gonzaga looking great against Oklahoma to start the year. I'm really high on this Gonzaga team. I think Gonzaga fans are really high on this team, which is something that's kind of bled through into just interacting with them, like on my newsletter and stuff like that, and Discord. Like Gonzaga fans are way up right now and think they're being slept on, and I kind of am inclined to agree. What was one team I wanted to shout out that had a good start? Oh, Oklahoma State, a kind of a sneaky sleeper pick in the Big 12 this year. And they came out against Texas A&M and ran them. Really, what I think most people think is going to be a pretty good Texas A&M team under Bucky McMillan. They got a lot of talent. Obviously, they got to put it together. It's sort of the classic first year coach thing, and I think they were missing Mackenzie Mbako for that game. So there's a lot for them to gel and figure out. But it's a team with Rylan Griffin and Federico and Pop Isaacs. Jakari Lane. These are all good, high-level, high-major college basketball players coming in to play a new system, and it's going to be tricky. But Oklahoma State was really, really good. Scored 1.09 points per trip. The talent here is really fascinating. Guys like Kanye Clary, Victorious Miller. It was one of those things where, again, I put myself through the exercise of trying to preview every high-major team before the season starts, mostly because it helps me. I mean, in theory, because it's useful to readers and they like reading it, right? That's kind of the main point. But it also helps me figure out who's on every roster so that I kind of have some idea after an offseason full of turnover. And the Oklahoma State roster was the one where I went down and was like, these are some interesting names and players here that have showed a lot of talent at previous stops, a couple with some past, issues at schools and personality stuff that will require a deft touch from Steve Lutz, but really good start for Oklahoma State. And I'm kind of on the Cowboys bandwagon right now.
Yeah, I want to give Lutz some credit because when he got that job, a lot of people were like, Lutz keeps going into these great situations, or like it's just kind of like he's at the perfect spot to get pulled up the ranks. You know what I mean? But Steve Lutz, he's a good coach, so I wanted to give him some love as well. I think that's a good point. And Texas A&M to me, like, just I think the M and A&M stands for mercenaries, a bunch of mercenaries. Like I just feel like this roster, I'm a little worried that there is a lot of like pick me energy, main character syndrome on that roster. So I mean, shout out to Bucky Ball. I believe he's a really good coach, and he can kind of get those guys to gel together at some point. But for now, it definitely showed in that game that this might be more of a process than maybe A&M folks thought at the jump. But yeah, I like when Oklahoma State's good. Shout out to Eddie Sutton. It's always good when they're playing some good basketball. So it's good.
Yeah, no, I agree. I agree on A&M, and they're a reason why I wanted to bring this game up too, beyond Oklahoma State, is it is going to be really interesting to watch Bucky McMillan put this thing together this year. Not just because of the players that he has, and they're again experienced guys who have transferred a couple times in some cases, who are in theory coming in because you get a job and you need to sign guys and you get the best guys you can possibly get, but it's tricky. And I have no doubt that A&M had a fair amount of money to spend on their roster, but they're also, it's hard to put a really cohesive, and for Bucky McMillan, especially a guy who has been a very ideological
Bucky
coach,
ball,
where he has a very clear theory of how he wants his teams to play. At least at the mid-major level, we have seen coaches regularly who have that kind of thing. I think Shaka Smart being the most notable example of, you can play a certain way when you've got a bunch of 6'2" to 6'7" mid-major guys on your team who are going to press 40 minutes a game, and you can rotate several of them in because the gulf between your fourth guy and your eighth guy is not as wide as maybe a program with more stars in it, or whatever you want to say.
And you can run them and condition them because like they're going to actually have to do it. You know what I mean? Like there's a layer of that too.
And then you get to a place that where you are playing against teams where you got to have big guys, and you're not going to maybe be able to press for 40 minutes the way McMillan has it at past stops. And maybe you're not going to have as much sort of quick shot generation that he had. So the melding of the players and the style with what it takes in theory, and maybe he'll prove this theory wrong. I don't know. We'll see how it goes. To win in a league like the Big 12, where you have to be a little bit more versatile and you have to have big guys that you can come in and protect the rim with and rebound on the back end. It's just going to be really fascinating to see him try to put this together. So that was a really interesting game. That's a little low key, I think, compared to some of the other stuff we saw over this weekend, and compared to what we've got coming up this week, because as we said, it's another really great week of college basketball where we are off to a fantastic start. The biggest game of this week, obviously, as you mentioned, is Louisville, Kentucky. I do kind of wish this game was happening in like January or February, where I felt like everybody had a better chance of being healthy. It's still going to be really fun to watch. What are you most excited for, beyond, Louisville fans and Kentucky fans working hard not to fight each other in the parking lot on the way out of the game?
It's a very fun, rivalry in general, but they do this thing where, they try to hype this up as the best rivalry in basketball, but then at the end of the day, they're still scared to put it in prime time. So I need them to all agree to play this game in January, February, when both teams are who they are, and there's no, it's early season, right? I feel like they built it so that they could have the concessions and the excuses kind of built in on both sides. They're almost like trying to protect themselves a little bit on both sides. And Pat Kelsey versus Mark Pope, my favorite coaching photo that's going around. Mark Pope being his tall 6'8" self, and then Pat Kelsey being, his, short man king, short king syndrome, whatever you want to call it self. Them next to each other, I think it's a fun, dichotomy between those two guys. So the matchup is great. The backcourts are going to be fascinating, right? Just to kind of see what Mikal Brown, Otega Owe, what that looks like between those two guys. Those are two stars. And I think the depth of these teams is going to be fascinating. I wish Jalen Lowe was playing in this game. So again, going back to the excuses, these are not the full formalized versions of these teams at this point, but the prior press conference, you saw him, give him the F them on the way out of his press conference when talking about Kentucky. So we got a little bit of fire in the belly for this game, and we might have a moment where the bench is clear or there's some fisticuffs or there's like a little bit of a scuffle at some point. But that's good for the game. It's good for the rivalry. And I like Kentucky in this game to handle business. I think Kentucky could win the national championship. I don't want to get too far ahead of myself, but I think if they stay healthy, that's a team I really like in March. But Louisville has a real chance to win the ACC as well. So should be a really, really good game and a really fun matchup.
Yeah, Kentucky has been spectacular. This is something I talked about with folks in the offseason, and that I'm kind of paying the most attention to with this team is defense, because Mark Pope has almost never coached a top 50 level defense. And you think about Mark Pope's teams at BYU and last year at Kentucky, really smooth offensively, share the ball, move well, take good shots, generate a lot of threes and open looks, but a little bit lightweight sometimes defensively, and you just sort of get the feeling that like you can tell what coaches kind of what they like doing by how their teams perform on a yearly basis, and what's most interesting about the game to them. And clearly for Mark Pope is building team offenses that are flowing and fun and fluid. And the defense stuff,
and building a team in general, like it feels like they all like each other, like that's a very Mark Pope thing. It's very different than Calipari.
Yeah, I completely agree. Cal is just like, give me the talent, I'll figure it out. I don't care if people's dads get angry at other people's dads. I'll handle it myself. Pope, you definitely feel like he takes a certain level of pride and interest in that. But also, they have been spectacular defensively to start the season. They allowed 51 points in 70 trips against Nichols. Okay, it's Nichols. They played Valpo. Okay, it's Valpo, but it's 59 in 75 trips while scoring 107 on the other end. They're fourth in adjusted efficiency at KenPom right now on the defensive end. Again, maybe that'll come down some, but I think the thing that when you looked at this roster coming into the season, obviously very good, obviously super talented. When you're Kentucky in the NIL world, and reportedly it cost them, upwards of $20 million, a little over $20 million to put together this roster, you're going to have your pick of high major transfer guys. You don't have to go into he took, 8 gazillion shots at Towson last year. Let's give this guy, this 5'9" guard, a chance to see if he can play at the high major level. You're getting proven guys, but they didn't look to me like they had the same composition offensively as even last year's Kentucky team, and certainly the BYU teams, where you have, guys like Ali Khalifa, being the best passing big man, not named Robbie Avila in the sport. So
now at Louisville, which is a nice subplot.
Exactly like Louisville. And so the trade-off for that, though, I think, is a team that, with the personnel here, can't not play at least pretty good defense and has a chance to be like an elite defensive team. And if they are that, then whatever little minor downgrade you may make on the offensive end, if you're Mark Pope, you probably take, because they need to be both sides good to be a national title team, and thus far they have been. So yeah, I agree. I'm high on Kentucky too, but I'm going to really enjoy, as expected, watching this Louisville team all season, the way they are going to be able to shoot the ball and space the floor. And it's the kind of Louisville team that you can be really good on defense, you can play and you can execute relatively well, and they might still hit, 15, 23s on you anyway, and just kind of run you out of the gym despite, your best efforts. They can just shoot over the top of you. So I'm fascinated to see how it's going to play out. Good news for Kentucky fans. I just checked this during the show here. Mark Pope does not have jury duty. We've cleared that
right.
up. Did you see this? He was supposed to
so good.
potentially have jury duty and might have to miss the game. Like, that's, you can imagine him calling in like the whatever local court in Lexington, being like, hey guys, the coach of the basketball team, can I just defer this like a week, but it sounds like he was told he didn't have to do it. So
it feels like an excuse that works in Kentucky. You know what I mean? Like if you go into your prelim meeting and they're like, is there any reason why you can't be here for jury duty? And you're like, I'm the head coach of the Kentucky Wildcats. They're like, move along. Sir.
And we're playing Louisville. Can we
unless the judge is a Louisville fan, you know what I mean? There you go. That could be something contentious there. Like
could be. There's not so many of the Louisville fans south of the metro area of Louisville, from my
Exactly.
understanding. It's a
Yeah,
pretty
they
divided.
stay in Louisville. That's what I've heard.
They're on an island out there, but I'm sure you
Mm-hmm.
find some. Yeah, so fantastic game Tuesday night. One to watch. One of the best non-conference games of the season, really, in this calendar. So it'll be a great one to keep an eye on. What else are you looking forward to this week and this weekend, Tate?
Yeah, Texas Tech, Illinois, to me, I feel like is a game. Both of those teams, I really kind of have a crush on, especially Texas Tech. Texas Tech is Christian Anderson's one of my favorite players in the country. Still waiting for Toppin to kind of get into a groove and get back. So I think that's a team. McCaslin is a coach that, for the casual fans, he's obviously doing USA basketball, so he's already kind of moving into the general conversation. But I do feel like Grant McCaslin is going to end up being a star as a coach in this sport. And I feel like this Texas Tech team, with the talent that they have, this is a real chance for them to make a statement this year and go on a run, maybe a Final Four, potentially national championship type run. And then Illinois, I mean, if you just look at the metrics, I know you're locked in, so you see it. I mean, Illinois is everywhere. Their AP ranking is way behind where they're ranked, based on the computers and the metrics and the numbers. So they obviously have, a lot of talent on that roster. We joke about all the Balkan boys. You got Stojakovic as well, who was kind of an honorary Balkan boy, even though he was grew up in America. So in general, I really like that Illinois roster construction. I think Texas Tech is a really fun team, and just number 11, number 14, but really two teams to me that are top 10 teams going at it, and getting to see them this early in the season, I think that's going to be a really good game.
Yeah, agree completely. Two coaches who I think understand the sort of modern game and the modern sort of shot diet, and are willing to, particularly in Brad Underwood's case. I think Texas Tech recruits to its system a little bit more, maybe. I think Brad Underwood is happy to just kind of figure it out on the fly and take guys
sure.
who do different things. You know what I mean? To take guys who do different things, and okay, we'll turn our team into this thing one year and totally reorient it in a different direction the next year, just based on the personnel we have and what we think we do best. I think we saw that last year, sort of how they became a very sort of like immediately ball screen reliant team the minute he put that team out, and switched things up from past seasons. And we're seeing that again this year. And we're seeing guys, emerge too for Illinois. And yeah, I mean, like, they're third in Ken Palm now, as you mentioned. They've beaten Jackson State 113-55, Florida Gulf Coast, which is not, this is not like a bottom barrel, it's a 200-ish ranked program. Beat them.
They're working the net, though. They know what they're doing. Yeah.
Oh, you got to work the net, man. This is the time of the year for it. But the point of all that essentially was seeing these two coaches scheme each other and try to take things away and try to generate good shots, against each other this early in the season is going to be extremely fun to watch. And yeah, Christian Anderson, off to an absolutely incredible start, was sort of the most prototypical breakout character of the offseason. If you like look at his numbers that he had as a freshman for a really good team on relatively low usage, right? He is usually fourth or fifth option in that offense. But you extrapolate out what he produced as a freshman, particularly from three. He still took 187 threes last year, which is not nothing. So he has taken on much bigger, he's up to almost 28% usage. His offensive rating's looking great. His assist rate right now is 44%. It was 12% last year. So this shows you a guy who is in full sophomore, wow, I'm really good now mode, and has played like it. And both of these teams might have a little bit of injury concerns coming in. Not everybody's played their full rosters yet. A little bit like the Kentucky Louisville game, but I'm fascinated by that one and really excited for it. So I think those are the two to watch. But again, it's another great week of college basketball. It's going to be a great weekend of college basketball. I'm super excited. One shout out I want to give, a little mid-major shout out here, since we primarily talked about high major teams and sort of high profile stuff. Yale. I think we have a real deal mid-major team with Yale. Now, granted, it's one game and it was a game against Navy, but Navy again is a pretty good mid-major team this year. Came into that game against Yale ranked 155th. So right in the sweet spot, right in the meat of the curve in terms of Division I rankings. And Yale beat them 97-68 and just absolutely throttled them and jumped from 102nd in KenPom where they started the season, and where during my mid-major show and during talking to Evan Miyakawa, we were sort of lamenting the lack of real, actual, not the top of the A10 or the Mountain West or teams that are basically not mid-majors in the classic sense. Yale obviously is that, and they look like they are going to be one of the teams that can emerge as, okay, yeah, some mid-majors are still out there doing it in the sort of classic sense. So I'm excited for Yale to hopefully keep that going.
Yeah, Riley Fox leads the country in BPM right now. So if you go to Torvik and look him up, Riley Fox, he's a combo forward, but looked incredible in their first game, could shoot the ball really well. So I like the Ivy League shout out. The Ivy League, they just have something that when you watch them, it's just like, yeah, when you see them, they're actually good, right? Remember when Princeton, Mitch Henderson made that run a couple years ago? It's just like, oh yeah, this is a fun team. They got some real talent on this team. And then you see like a guy like Malik Mack at Georgetown, you're like, oh yeah, this guy was killing it at Harvard, and now he moves up the ranks. But yeah, Riley Fox, that's a good name to know as well. And Yale, I like the shout out. I like when the mid-major guys get some love. They deserve it, so it's good.
Yeah, and mostly I'm just, again, one of those things coming into the season. I'm kind of curious as we see more and more games, if we can get a little pushback on some of the preseason concerns, or see some of them validated, or whatever the case may be. But I'm casting about the country for potential mid-major, oh, this team's going to go 30-3 type of thing and be a terrifying number 11 or number 12 seed. So I think Yale, again, it's 40 minutes of basketball. We'll see how it progresses, but that big jump in underlying metrics was exciting to see. So we will keep an eye out for more of that, and for more of all the games we've talked about and all the teams we've talked about, and much more besides. Before we go, once again, go check out Basket Under Review. Check out our sponsor, Home Field. Thank you to our producer, Corey Aldis, for putting together the show. Thanks to our graphics guy, Sam Frazier, and Trilly, and everybody over at Basket Under Review. Thank you all for listening. We will be back next week with another episode. Thank you, Tate, for being here, man. This was good.
Of course. Anytime, man. Thank you.
All right.